These are the ones who, living in the flesh, planted the church with their blood. They drank the chalice of the Lord and became the friends of God. This evening's Mass, of the weekend's Mass, is being offered for the repose of the soul of Daniel Marino Perica. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you. Today we celebrate the great feast of Saints Peter and Paul, which has been transferred to this weekend, the two great pillars of our church. Peter, the leader of the church, and stationed in the early community in Jerusalem and then in Rome. And then, of course, the great missionary St. Paul, who took the gospel around the world as far as he could travel, both martyrs of the church, and so we read today. Both were slightly unlikely characters, but God chose them. They were called by God to do some definite service. Of course, both experienced a powerful experience of Christ and was transformed to do what God had called them to do. We also ask for this transformation. We also ask for a cleansing of our sin as we call to mind our faults and failings, trusting in the mercy of God. Lord Jesus, you have revealed yourself as the way to the Father. Lord, have mercy. You have poured out on your people the Spirit of truth. Christ, have mercy. You are the Good Shepherd, leading us to eternal life. Lord, have mercy. May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will. We praise you, we bless you, we adore you, we glorify you, we give you thanks for your great glory. Lord God, Heavenly King, O God Almighty Father, Lord Jesus Christ, only begotten Son, Lord God, Lamb of God, Son of the Father, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. You take away the sins of the world, receive our prayer. You are seated at the right hand of the Father, have mercy on us. For you alone are the Holy One, you alone are the Lord, you alone are the Most High, Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit, in the glory of God the Father. Amen. Let us pray. O God, who on the solemnity of the Apostles Peter and Paul, give us the noble and holy joy of this day. Grant, we pray, that your church may in all things follow the teaching of those through whom she received the beginnings of right religion. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. King Herod started persecuting certain members of the church. He beheaded James, the brother of John, and when he saw that this pleased the Jews, he decided to arrest Peter as well. This was during the days of unleavened bread, and he put Peter in prison, assigning 4 squads of 4 soldiers, each to guard him in turns. Herod meant to try Peter in public after the end of Passover week. All the time Peter was under guard, the church prayed to God for him unremittingly. On the night before Herod was to try him, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, fastened with double chains, while guards kept watch at the main entrance to the prison. Then suddenly the angel of the Lord stood there, and the cell was filled with light. He tapped Peter on the side and woke him. "Get up," he said. "Hurry." And the chains fell from his hands. The angel then said, "Put on your belt and sandals." After he had done this, the angel next said, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." Peter followed him, but had no idea that what the angel did was all happening in reality. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed 2 guard posts, one after the other, and reached the iron gate leading to the city. This opened of its own accord. They went through it, and had walked the whole length of one street when suddenly the angel left him. It was only then that Peter came to himself. "Now, I I know it is all true, he said. The Lord really did send his angel and has saved me from Herod and from all that the Jewish people were so certain would happen to me. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. The response to the psalm is, from all my terrors, the Lord set me free. I will bless the Lord at all times, his praise always on my lips. In the Lord my soul shall make its boast, the humble shall hear and be glad. From all my terrors the Lord set me free. Glorify the Lord with me, together let us praise his name. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. From all my terrors he set me free. From all my terrors the Lord set me free. Look towards him and be radiant, let your faces not be abashed. This poor man called, the Lord heard him, and rescued him from all his distress. From all my terrors the Lord set me free. The angel of the Lord is encamped around those who revere him to rescue them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. He is happy who seeks refuge in him. From all my terrors the Lord set me free. A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to Timothy. My life is already being poured out as a libation, and the time has come for me to be gone. I have fought the good fight to the end. I have run the race to the finish. I have kept the faith. All there is to come now is the crown of righteousness reserved for me, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not only to me, but to all those who have longed for his appearing. The Lord stood by me and gave me power, so that through me the whole message might be proclaimed for all the pagans to hear. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from all evil attempts on me and bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. The Gospel acclamation. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. You are Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the underworld can never hold out against it. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he put this question to his disciples. Who do people say the Son of Man is? And they said, some say he is John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. But you, he said, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter spoke up. You are the Christ, he said, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, Simon, son of Jonah, you are a happy man, because it was not flesh and blood that revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So I now say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the underworld can never hold out against it. I will give you the key to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be considered bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be considered loose in heaven. The Gospel of the Lord. So today we remember two extraordinary men, Peter and Paul. Now, Peter, we know a fair bit about Peter. Peter, the fisherman. So he'd have been used to, of course, selling his fish pretty much to anyone who would buy it. I can imagine someone selling fish in his time couldn't be choosy. So he would have sold fish, presumably, to the Romans, possibly for the king to eat, for the emperor to eat. He would have sold it to almost certainly to pagans, to Greek-speaking pagans. He would have sold it, of course, to Jews as well. So he would have probably had to have been fairly eloquent, probably have a basic knowledge of Greek, a basic knowledge of Latin, of Aramaic and Hebrew. But he was a hot-headed man, as we know. Now, we know that Peter is the one that cuts the ear off of one of the soldiers when they try to arrest Jesus. Peter is the one that doesn't understand that Jesus has to go to the cross to show us how much he loves us. Peter's the one that denies Christ 3 times. But Peter is the one that's chosen to be the leader of the early church, the first pope, if you will. And we know why, because he's the one that recognises that Jesus is the Son of God. He understands him maybe a little bit more than the others do. And it's because of this that God has given him this faith and this grace to see that he's chosen to be the first pope, if you will, the leader of the early church. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Now, Peter, we know, was an extraordinary man. We know that Peter was a target of King Herod. See, King Herod had beheaded James the Apostle, and as we heard in our first reading, that the people were so happy that they'd killed James the Apostle that he was going to go after Peter next. So Peter gets thrown into jail, as we hear. Peter is imprisoned, but an angel comes to rescue him. Peter doesn't really fully understand what's happening when the angel comes, and he thinks he's just dreaming. So the angel walks with him a little further until Peter finally realises this isn't a dream. The angel was real. And when he did wake up, Peter realises that the power of God is stronger than the power of King Herod. Now we know that Peter finally makes his way to Rome, and there, by tradition we are told, he won't be crucified in the same way that Jesus was crucified. He wants to be crucified upside down because he doesn't feel that he's worthy. And there he is buried underneath the church of St. Peter. It's that wonderful thing that the church, the mother church, shall we say, of all churches, is built upon the tomb of Peter. You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Now, Paul, of course, we know, was a Pharisee. Now, the Pharisees were, of course, well versed in law, in the Torah, in the Jewish law. Paul would have been, or Saul as he was known then, Saul as a Pharisee would have seen the early Christian community and probably hated them, because we know that Jesus came and he was slightly radical. He said to the people, you have heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say this to you, love your enemy, do good to those who hate you. That was one of the cherished laws in the Torah that he was kind of slightly changing. Jesus said things like, man was made for the Sabbath, not Sabbath for man. So we know that he changed laws if he felt that they had run their course, shall we say. He was a radical. He was a radical, and so the early Christian community also probably wouldn't have observed the Jewish dietary requirements, so they would have eaten possibly pig's flesh, and so this is the kind of thing that would have incensed Saul as a Pharisee. He would not have liked this, and so he did indeed persecute the church. We know that he totally approved of the stoning of the first martyr, Stephen. But then, of course, he has this immense conversion. He experiences Christ on the way to Damascus in a powerful way. But he had a problem. He was feared, and we know that the early Christian community was slightly wary of him. He went because, of course, he persecuted the church. And so when he goes to Jerusalem and he tries to say to them, look, the early Christian community, look, I've changed. Well, lo and behold, they didn't quite believe him. So he only stays in the city for 15 days. He then tries to join the disciples, but they're afraid of him, and they can't quite believe that he's a disciple. so he stays in the city and preaches there. But he so angers the Jews that they try to kill him. So now the persecutor has become the persecuted. And to save his life, the church ship him back to Tarsus, where he came from. Now he then, of course, starts to travel all around the world as far as he can to tell people about Jesus Christ. Paul always claims to be an apostle. He says in the letter to the Galatians, "From Paul, an apostle, who doesn't owe his authority to men or his appointment to any human being, but who was appointed by Jesus Christ." Now, he's trying to defend his authority there. It sounds a little defensive, doesn't it? Maybe Paul's crisis, his thorn in his side, was the fact that he always had to try and prove himself. The early Christian community was slightly weary of him. The Jewish community was slightly weary of him. His fellow Pharisees would have hated him for converting. And so we know that he would have had a hard time of it. So here we have these two pillars of the church. Now, who would have chosen them? Possibly you and I wouldn't have done, but Jesus did. Both were martyred in Rome under the Emperor Nero. For all their faults, in the end, they both had a love without reserve. Both knew that Jesus was the Messiah and that he'd risen from the dead, and they were prepared to die for that fact. Notice that I say fact. It wasn't quite a belief, because they'd both encountered the risen Jesus personally. They knew it to be true and was prepared to die for it. So we honour them today. But as we look at the personalities of Peter and Paul, we see that God called them to use their personalities to spread the gospel. Peter, this hot-headed fisherman, to look after the flock. Paul, to use his training as a Pharisee and his strength of character to ensure that the non-Jews would be welcomed into the church. Now, that's possibly the reason that Jesus chose them. But if I were the Lord, I possibly would have given them the different roles. Peter, who is more possibly used to dealing with the world, I would have sent out as a missionary, because he knew a little bit of Latin, knew a little bit of Aramaic, would have known a little bit of Greek, so he would have been able to deal with the world a lot more. He was a more worldly man. So I would have sent him out to the Gentiles, the non-Jews. Paul, because he was a Pharisee and he knew the law inside out, and he knew that Jesus was the Messiah that the Jews had been waiting for, I'd have sent him to the Jews. But no, it's the other way round. Jesus chooses Peter as the one that stays in Jerusalem and tends the flock there. Paul he sends out to the world. But there we go. That would have been my choice. But it tells us something, doesn't it? It tells us something very, very clear. Our Lord chooses who he wants. It's a reminder to us that sometimes we feel like we can't do what God has called us to do. We feel like we're the wrong people. We're the type of people that maybe others wouldn't choose. But God has chosen you. And maybe for reasons you don't understand, I don't understand. It's a reminder to us that our talents and our weaknesses can become means of helping others if we allow it. We don't have to be perfect for God to work through us. God can work through us, faults and all, as he did with Peter and Paul. Amen. We profess now our faith. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all ages. God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us men and for our salvation, he came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary, and became man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate, he suffered death and was buried, and rose again on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures. He ascended into heaven, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son, who with the Father and the Son is adored and glorified, who has spoken through the prophets. I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, and I look forward to the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. Dearest Lord, we come before you with open hearts. Hear our prayers that we bring before you. We pray for Pope Francis. Let us learn from his loving words as he asks us to witness to our faith. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. As lockdown restrictions begin to ease, we pray to resume activities with a heightened awareness and responsibility in looking after our common home. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We ask for the prayers of the two great apostles, Peter and Paul, as leaders in the origin of our faith and the very foundations on which the church was built. We give thanks today for our own church and our parish communities. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray for families as they come back together. May they experience pure joy and happiness in their hearts as they reunite with loved ones. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray for families that are bereaved. Let us remember their loss and show genuine empathy for their broken hearts. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We seek now the intercession of Our Lady, Queen of all apostles, as we say. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Father Almighty, we pray and ask you to hear our prayers through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord, God of all creation. For through your goodness we have received the bread we offer you, fruit of the earth and work of human hand. It will become for us the bread of life. Blessed be God forever. By the mystery of this water and wine, when we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. Blessed are you, Lord God of all creation. For through your goodness we have received the wine we offer you, fruit of the vine and work of human hand. It will become our spiritual drink. Blessed be God forever. With humble spirit and contrite heart, may we be accepted by you, O Lord, and may our sacrifice in your sight this day be pleasing to you, O God. Wash me, O Lord, from my iniquity, cleanse me from all my sin. Pray, brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God, the Almighty Father. May the Lord accept the sacrifice at our hands, for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and good of all his holy church. May the prayer of the apostles, O Lord, accompany the sacrificial gift that we present to your name for consecration, and may their intercession make us devoted to you in celebration of the sacrifice. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is truly right and just, our duty and our salvation, always and everywhere to give you thanks, Lord, Holy Father, Almighty and Eternal God. For by your providence, the blessed apostles Peter and Paul bring us joy. Peter, foremost in confessing the faith. Paul is outstanding preacher. Peter, who established the early church for the remnant of Israel. Paul, master and teacher of the Gentiles that we call. And so each in a different way, gathered together the one family of Christ, and revered together throughout the world, they share one martyr's crown. And therefore, with all the angels and saints, we praise you, as without end we acclaim. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. We use the first Eucharistic prayer. To you, therefore, most merciful Father, we make humble prayer and petition through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, that you accept and bless these gifts, these offerings, these holy and unblemished sacrifices, which we offer you firstly for your Holy Catholic Church. Be pleased to grant her peace to guard, unite and govern her throughout the whole world, together with your servant Francis our Pope and Alan our Bishop, and all those who, holding to the truth, hand on the Catholic and Apostolic faith. Remember, Lord, your servants, and all gathered here whose faith and devotion are known to you. For them we offer you this sacrifice of praise, or they offer it for themselves and all who are dear to them, for the redemption of their souls and hope of health and well-being, and paying their homage to you, the eternal God, living and true. In communion with those whose memory we venerate, especially the glorious of the Virgin Mary, Mother of our God and Lord Jesus Christ, and blessed Joseph, her spouse, your blessed apostles and martyrs, Peter and Paul, Andrew and all your saints, we ask that through their merits and prayers in all things, we may be defended by your protecting help. Therefore, Lord, we pray, graciously accept this oblation of our service, that of your whole family order our days in your peace, and command that we be delivered from eternal damnation, and counted among the flock of those you have chosen. Be pleased to God, we pray, to bless, acknowledge, and approve this offering in every respect. Make it spiritual and acceptable, so that it may become for us body and blood of your most beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. On the day before he was to suffer, he took bread in his holy and venerable hands, and with eyes raised to heaven to you, O God, his almighty Father, giving you thanks, he said the blessing, broke the bread and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it. For this is my body, which will be given up for you. My Lord and my God, I offer you the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ." In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took this precious chalice in his holy and venerable hands, and once more giving you thanks, he said the blessing, and gave the chalice to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me." My Lord and my God, I offer you the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. The mystery of faith. Save us, Saviour of the world, for by your cross and resurrection you have set us free. Therefore, Lord, as we celebrate the memorial of the Blessed Passion, the resurrection from the dead, and the glorious ascension into heaven of Christ, your Son, our Lord, we, your servants and your holy people, offer to your glorious majesty, from the gifts that you have given us, this pure victim, this holy victim, this spotless victim, the holy bread of eternal life, and the chalice of everlasting salvation. Be pleased to look upon these offerings with a serene and kindly countenance, and to accept them as once you were pleased to accept the gifts of your servant Abel the just, the sacrifice of Abraham, our father in faith, and the offering of your high priest Melchizedek, a holy sacrifice, a spotless victim. In humble prayer we ask you, Almighty God, command that these gifts be borne by the hands of your holy angel to your altar on high, in the sight of your divine majesty, so that all of us, who through this participation at the altar receive the most holy body and blood of your Son, may be filled with every grace and heavenly blessing. Remember, Lord, your servants, Daniel and Marino Perico, and all the holy souls who have gone before us with the sign of faith and rest in the sleep of peace. Grant them, O Lord, we pray, and all who sleep in Christ, a place of refreshment, light, and peace. To us also, your servants, who though sinners, hope in your abundant mercies, graciously grant some share in fellowship with your holy apostles and martyrs, with John the Baptist, Stephen, Matthias, Barnabas, and all your saints. Admit us, we beseech you, into their company, not weighing our merits, but granting us your pardon through Christ our Lord, through whom you continue to make all these good things, O Lord. You sanctify them, fill them with life, bless them, and bestow them upon us.
Through him and with him and in him, O God Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever. Amen.
At the Saviour's command, formed by divine teaching, we dare to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Saviour, Jesus Christ. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours now and forever. Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, Peace I leave you, my peace I give you, look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant her peace and unity, in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Let us offer each other the sign of peace. Peace be with you. May this mingling with the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ bring eternal life to us who receive it. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, grant us peace. Behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb. Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed. And may the body of Christ be saved eternal life. Peter said to Jesus, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Let us pray. Grant us, O Lord, who have been renewed by this sacrament, so to live in the church, that persevering in the breaking of the bread and in the teaching of the apostles, we may be one heart and one soul, made steadfast in your love, through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you, and may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go forth, the Mass is ended. Thanks be to God. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in the day of battle. Be our safeguard against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust down to hell Satan and all the wicked spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exoles filii Hevae, a te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ego advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. So as you know, starting from Saturday of next week, we are able to once again have Mass here in Sacred Heart and at St John Fisher together. Now, as you all probably know by now, of course, there are some restrictions. We are asked to keep the Mass as short as possible, that there will be no singing, and that we will have to keep a certain distance apart. Now, in regards to those restrictions, we know that if we want to keep a metre apart, you have to come with a mask. It's essential, okay? It's all going to be a bit strange, we know that, but at least we'll be able to come together. So, just want to say to you, if you're coming to Mass on the Saturday night or on the Sunday morning, then please bring a mask. And in that way, we'll be able to sit you a little bit closer. We won't be able to fill this church, but if you bring your mask, we'll be able to fit more people in. Now, I'm putting on an extra Mass next weekend so that people can, if they can't make the 5:30 at Sacred Heart, the 9 o'clock at St John Fisher, or the 11 o'clock Mass here at Sacred Heart, I'm saying another Mass at 12:30 p.m. on the Sunday here at Sacred Heart. Now, I know people say about the government, and especially about Boris Johnson, Dominic Raab, Matt Hancock and all the rest of them, that sometimes they get a bit confused about the messages that they hear. And we might be guilty of that too, because at first we thought we might be able to put together a rota. And so we asked you to come, send us an email or phone us and tell us whether you wanted to come. And therefore, you'd be able to almost like book a place here in the church. Then I realised quite clearly that there's lots of people who are not watching these Masses, who come to this church but don't have internet access. They don't have that privilege. So they can't hear this message that I'm passing on to you today. So we are saying, please come early to avoid disappointment. Now we are going to extend into the church halls. We're going to live stream them now, so that there's a bit of an overflow. So we're hoping that we won't have an issue, but I think we probably will. But please don't feel offended if you can't make the Mass you normally do. Now, the other thing that we would recommend quite highly is, let's say you can't get to a Sunday Mass here. The church is saying that please come during the week if you can then. If you can't come if you can't get into the church, or indeed if on the Sunday, if you can't get to a Mass on the weekend, then come during the week. The Masses are in the newsletter. so you'll see when and where they are. Now the church, of course, isn't going to say, tut tut, you know, you're not fulfilling your Sunday obligation, because in these strange circumstances, we know that those rules need to be bent as our Lord knew himself. So please come, everyone. Lovely to see you. I have to say this to you. I'm sick and tired of saying Mass in this church on my own. Okay, I need you here. I need my people, my parishioners here in this church, and at St. Anna John Fisher too. So please come, and I'm so looking forward to seeing all of you come and say Mass here and be with me as I say Mass here. So we look forward to seeing you then, and as usual, take care everyone. God bless and be safe.